What is going on, guys? I'm Zach. Welcome to my shop. So I am getting married this year, which means I need a few of my buddies up by my side up at the altar. But in the true DIY style, I wanted to do something special for my guys. So today I want to take you through how I made 6 of these beer totes made from 1/2-inch walnut veneer plywood from Purebond. Huge shout out to them for supporting this video. Now real quick, most of this video was shot about 9 months ago as I was getting ready for the initial stages of my wedding, which means I was living in a totally different space. I was in an apartment with a carport, so most of what you'll see is me making these in that carport as well as in my parents' garage, but it's really interesting to see where I was making things and then where I'm making things now. And it's really awesome just to see the transition of making in a temporary space to now being in this permanent space, so I hope you guys enjoy this video. As I said before in my intro, I'll be making 6 of these beer totes from a single sheet of 4x8 1/2-inch walnut plywood from Purebond. Now I designed the project so that not only could I make 6 of these caddies easily from the material, but I'd have quite a bit left over that could be used for additional projects down the road. Step 1 was to break down the material. Now I'll show some measurements and the cut list on the screen here, but if you want exact measurements and my cut list, you should check out the written article that I'll link below. Now if you're gonna make one of these, you're probably better off just buying some 4/4 hardwood and making a single tote, as it'd be a lot more cost efficient. But since I was making 6 of these using really nice plywood, made perfect sense. Now once the larger pieces were broken down, I could begin making my smaller individual cuts on the miter saw. First was marking and making the outside pieces, which would have a specific angle to them, but that was just based purely on a personal preference. Next was cutting the dowel for each of the handles, which was just cut to length from a 3/4 inch dowel that I got at Home Depot. Now once I had all of my rough pieces cut, the next step was to cut half-lap joints so that the middle divider pieces could combine to form 6 individual spaces for beers. Now you can just as easily use different cheaper material here and cut individual pieces to make this grid section, but I chose to use the stop on my miter saw and cut the joints so that I only required 3 total pieces that slid together to form a grid for the beers. And by the way, cutting joints like this is perfectly safe on a miter saw and it works really well. So here are all the pieces that make up the totes. If you're just making one, you only need 1 set of each piece. Just like this. I hope that's clear. Again, check out the written article if you have any questions. Now before assembly, I very lightly sanded down the edges with 120 grit sandpaper. The veneer is very thin, so just 1 to 2 passes to break the rough edges is all you need. Otherwise, you'll sand off the surface. I needed to drill even holes on each side of the outside pieces to accept the dowel for the handle. So I marked even spacing on each piece, then used a 3/4 inch spade bit to drill the holes. What I did was drill one side 2/3 of the way through and then flip it over and drill the rest as to prevent tear out, and it worked perfectly. Then I test fit everything before gluing all things up. Now this is plywood, so lots of different grains flowing in different directions, but in reality, wood glue is plenty strong enough to attach everything together through just butt joints. Now you really don't need anything else here, but coincidentally, I had watched a video from David Picciuto on Make Something after I had built these totes, and his design was nearly identical to mine. Who knew? But he built something very similar and used dowels to reinforce all of the joints. It was a beautiful aesthetic to add to the piece, but after having glued the piece together and seeing how strong it was, I realized that the joints were so strong on their own that they could easily hold 5 times the amount of weight in beer without adding any of those joints. So I opted to not do that. And if you're curious, I'm just using Titebond 2 glue for this, clamping things up and letting them set for about 45 minutes for each joint and then moving to the next piece. And it all came together really quickly. Last thing to do was to add bottle openers, and I was able to find 6 of these cast iron openers for about $30 on Amazon. I attached them using some 1/2-inch wood screws that were pre-drilled and attached through the handle and the plywood. Very, very sturdy. And after that, the build was done, so last up was just to add a simple finish. I went with food safe mineral oil, which is really simple to apply. It goes on very quick and easy and really makes the grain pop, especially with walnut. And I loved how these came out and was excited to distribute them to my buddies ahead of the big day. So that is going to wrap it up for this video. I don't really have much more to say. I had a great time making these. The plywood was really easy to work with. It's beautiful to look at in its final state. And I look forward to getting married in a few weeks. We'll see you guys next time on the cutting board.